care?
No, they don't.
Where are you, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Just coming from a dentist appointment, and
Oh,
they're fitting me with a CPAP substitute. So it was a long appointment, and I'm gonna teach this class from my car, it looks like.
Okay, well, I've been using CPAP for many years. It works very well.
I'm switching from CPAP to a dental device.
Okay.
What brand CPAC do you have? Does anybody have Philips?
I have ResMed.
Philips has been recalled. It's giving people cancer.
Come on.
Anybody, anybody that has
whoa,
Philips,
whoa,
get
whoa,
rid of
whoa.
it.
No, I don't have Phelps. I have ResMed.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're fine.
you're right. There's a recall on certain models of the Philips Respironics
Right. Yes.
that they say is off-gassing, which is a potential cancer hazard. It's
Wow.
not giving people cancer, not yet.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Hundreds have been diagnosed with it. There's something about the foam that's in it that is contributing to the
Foam?
foam.
Insulation.
FOAM. Insulation. What's in it that
Oh.
adds. That's doing something to the when you're ingesting it. When you're breathing it in.
Yeah, and that's what I've got. I've got the Philips.
Okay, get rid of it fast.
Well, he must have the correct model. They wouldn't be doing it at this point.
Well, I'm switching from the CPAP to a dental device for other reasons as well. So
Good.
Okay.
well,
I
Glad
feel
you're
better.
joining us now.
let us go ahead and get started. We're running a little bit late,
He's
and I
okay.
think we have a lot of material to cover. So let us begin. First of all, I want to welcome Barry and everyone else to our Torah study. Nan, it's been a while since we've seen you. Glad you're joining us. Let us begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam,
Asher kishanu b'mitzvotav,
Anu
anu v'hanagner v'devai Torah.
Listen, are you our God?
Adonai,
You
our
know,
God,
plural, you sanctified us with the commandments, commanded us in the first page of the Torah. Amen. Rabbi,
Amen. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for being in my car, and so hopefully it will be an interesting session today. Normally, of course, as you know, we usually deal with Harvey Fields' commentary on the portion of the week. This week, because of Sukkot, we have a special reading. I presume everybody has that. It's by a man named Arthur Schaefer. And
I don't have it.
But
and
but that's okay.
It was
It-
wonderful. I never, I didn't know these things before.
Yeah. And
It's
thank you,
called-
Reva.
It's called the Agricultural and Ecological Symbolism of the Four Species of Sukkot. So before we start reading it, let's kind of review. Sukkot has certain symbols. I mean, religion has symbols, correct? So everything in religion is symbolic. And as Sukkot has a lot of symbols. And so last night I was at Barry's house, and we want to welcome Barry. I think he's there. Hi, Barry.
Hello, hello.
I had a great time last night. And
did
maybe everyone wants to introduce themselves quickly, one at a time, and just say who you are and where you're from originally, something like that. Lorraine?
Hi, good morning, Barry, and welcome. I'm Lorraine Stolov, and I'm originally from the Bronx in New York, and spent most of my life raising my family and with my husband in New Jersey.
Marcia Gratz, and I'm from Manhattan in New York, grew up there, lived in the Boston area and San Diego before coming here, a little bit of Connecticut. Okay.
I'm from Manhattan also. Actually, from the same neighborhood as the rabbi. We few blocks apart, and I've been here now about 20 years.
Ray,
I,
Ray Balney. I left New York at the age of 2, grew up in Detroit, lived in Minneapolis as a new bride, and spent from I spent much of my life in Chicago, and especially helped to start the first and third synagogues in Skokie, Illinois. And I then came here after my husband's death because one of my sons lives here. It's been a busy life and a wonderful one.
We have 200-plus-year-old people in this group, so it's
Yes.
hell of a.
Yes.
Oh, you want me to go? Barry Maltash. I'm from originally Queens, got out here via Boston through Thousand Oaks, California, and then to Phoenix, and we moved here a year ago, actually. A year ago today is when we moved into our home here. And yeah, so here we are, my wife and I.
Mazel
My
tov.
wife still works. I'm retired, she still works.
I'm Bernie Feinberg. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, raised my family in New Jersey, retired to Arizona in 1999, and a couple of months ago, I moved to Colorado.
And one of the nice things about Zoom is that we can Zoom people in from all over.
Right.
I'm
And I quoted from Bernie in one of my High Holy Day sermons.
Yes.
Pam, you go.
Good.
Me? I'm Pam Katz. My husband Dave and I moved here to Arizona 15 years ago from Connecticut.
Okay, Viva.
Yeah, I'm Reva Litt. I started off in Connecticut and got out as soon as I finished college. Mostly lived in Washington, D.C. for over 30 years. I'm the person who has for a while been the contact person for getting out the Torah study material. And so many people know me because once a week you get Torah readings that come out. So if you
Thank you, Reva.
You're welcome. If you want to stay on the list, and I'm not sure I'm always going to be the one sending them out, but if you want to stay on the list, please call the temple or email the temple and contact Roz and make sure she has all your correct contact information and make sure she knows you're registered for this class.
Okay, thank you,
Discussion.
Reva.
How do I register for this class? Because I'm not registered.
All you need to do is call up the
Come to the
office, give her
Just
your
tell 'em.
name and the email address you want to use and the best phone number. Thank you.
Miriam,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Marie.
Who's going?
You.
Me?
Yeah.
You. I am Miriam Herschel. I lived in Queens, New York until a little after I was married. Then I lived in the Panama Canal Zone for 30 years and now here.
How old are you, Miriam?
101 or really 102. You're an inspiration.
Yes.
Thank you. I hope so. I just have to leave a little early because I have an appointment with the doctor. They're changing my meds for a little something. I hope it works.
I'm Steve Siegel. I represent the Brotherhood of Chapel Beth Shalom. Grew up in Oklahoma City, then moved to Kansas City, and then retired and came here.
I'm Van Rubin. I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona 33 years ago from Long Island, but I grew up in New Rochelle, New York, and I've lived in Sun City for about 11 or 12 years now. I've been a member of the temple. I am a trustee and I am in charge of the ordering the plaques for the memorial board.
Larry?
I already gave my,
No, I'm talking about Larry Solomon.
That's me.
Yay.
Hello.
Tell us who
Good,
you
we hear
are
you.
and where you're from and all that stuff.
Well, okay, I'm here. What do you want to know?
Where are you from?
Larry, where are you?
Get here.
I don't know that it's fixed, but I will either have is one or two numbers here, names.
I guess Larry is from New York and he lived in Los Angeles for many years and he moved here a little more than a year ago.
Yes.
And he lives with his partner Alan in the edge of Sun City, Peoria.
Okay.
Right.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Shirley?
Okay, I wish you would get it so that I could see the pictures of the people. I don't have that here.
Shirley, you have to unmute.
Shirley, you have to unmute.
Uh-oh. Shirley, you have to unmute.
There we
There
go.
you go.
That got it. Okay, I'm from
Yep.
Detroit. I got tired of the snow and rain when I was 45 and I moved to Grand Cayman, British West Indies and lived there for almost 10 years. And then I moved to Mobile and that's where I still live. And I met the rabbi when he was a rabbi here at our synagogue, at our temple. Glad to be with you.
Good to have you.
So we have outside people from outside of Arizona. We have Colorado and
We didn't hear from,
Alabama.
we didn't hear from Cy.
Okay, Cy.
I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm a World War II veteran and I've been a member of the temple for about 20 years.
Perfect. So welcome to everybody and good morning. If you can't hear or see me, just start yelling or flapping your arms around. And right now I can only see 4 people on my phone. So I see Babette, Riva, Cy, and Bernie right now. And so you're the 4 that have to flap your arms. We're looking at this article that hopefully you can download if you haven't already, called The Agricultural and Ecological Symbolism of the 4 Species. So what I was starting to ask is, what are some of the symbolisms of Sukkot that we should note before we start this? And particularly, what is that hut that I ate in last night at Barry and Claire's house? I came into their house. They have a beautiful brand new house, but we didn't sit down to eat in the house. I went straight through the house to the other end and out into their backyard, and they have this little hut up. And so what is that hut and what is the symbolism of that hut? Anyone who'd like to?
Isn't it supposed to, this is Marcia here, isn't it supposed to show the transiency of the Jews in their travels in the desert, and it's not supposed to be a permanent structure, and so you pray in that to symbolize the travels out of Egypt, if you will.
Okay, and what is the hut called?
The booth. It's a booth.
Sukkah.
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 Okay.
Sukkah.
Okay, so Sukkah. And the Sukkah, according to Marcia's understanding, is supposed to represent the Exodus from Egypt. The Israelites were living temporarily in the Sinai Desert.
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's Larry here. Yeah, I don't see anything, and maybe something has to be connected in the right.
You have to connect to video somewhere on your screen.
But I don't see now.
Video should be on the lower left side of your screen.
Yeah, move your cursor and maybe it'll come up.
Let's see.
Okay, Pam, anything else you can add about a sukkah?
Well, just that, well, Marcia, I think Marcia, you already said this, that it means booth, correct?
Oh, I didn't say that, but yes.
I said it, I put in booth.
Yes, okay.
But it also has the palm leaves, and the lulav.
Okay, so this is the next question that Miriam's already preempting is in addition to the sukkah itself, there's the 4 species. And what are the 4 species? And the first one, Miriam, is the
palm.
Okay, so it's a palm branch. And then the second one and third one and fourth one, Miriam?
Myrtle. I don't know. We don't have lulav.
Right.
What I
etrog.
Etrog.
Correct.
Estrog, yeah.
So you have the etrog and the
Etrog.
lulav, and on the lulav you put the hadassim and the aravot, which are 2 types of little leaves. And who can give me a basic explanation of these 4 species? Babette or Riva?
It has to be near water. Some of it.
Okay.
Steve's
Okay.
got his hand up.
Okay, it represents the different parts of the promised land. The mountains, the streams, the desert.
The fruit part of it was the etrog. Or is that
Etrog,
the
the
bitterness of the fruit? I don't
fruit.
know.
Okay, so we have the 4 species and then we have the actual sukkah. And the question is, what is the symbolic meaning? And you've heard here now 3 or 4 explanations, casually battered around. All right, let's take a look at the article and we'll see that the author immediately says that in general, the Torah gives the symbolic meaning, but about the 4 species, it does not. Okay, who'd like to read? We're on page 128. This is an article from the journal Tradition, which is published by the Rabbinical Council of America, which is the Orthodox Rabbinical Association. Okay, the agriculture and ecological symbolism of 4 species of Sukkot. Who would like to read? Babette, would you start us off?
Okay. Jewish rituals in the Torah are usually presented together with their symbolic meaning. For example, unleavened bread is eaten on Pesach. For thou comest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste. Similarly, Jews sit in booths during Sukkot so that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. It is peculiarly striking that there are no symbolic explanations accompanying the prescription for the 4 species of Sukkot. The Torah simply and succinctly states, and you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of the hadar tree, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of the thick-leaved trees and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. The Torah offers not a shred of meaning, religious, historical, or agricultural, about the rite of so faithfully and carefully performed to this day.
Okay, good. Comments about this? Riva?
No comments at this time.
No comments. Anyone? Bernie?
I do have a question. We talk about the sukkah, and there doesn't seem to be a consistency in the roofing material. When I grew up, we used pine boughs. When I lived in New Jersey, we used corn stalks, and I've forgotten what we used in Arizona, but it was not either of those 2. Is there some?
No, can I chime in on that? No, there is no specific thing that you need to put. I have stock which is reed, okay, that I have in a roll that I put on my sukkah. The only requirement is you have to see this, you have to be able to see the sky through the sukkah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of any restriction of material.
Now, Barry, when
It
you
has to-
say there's no restriction, what are you referring to?
Well, what you put to cover your sukkah, what your
Well,
roof.
where
would
would the restriction, where would you find such a restriction if there was one?
you would assume it would be either, you know, the Mishnah. I was going to ask the woman who read that what chapter that was read from, the Torah portion, what book pasuk was it in? Because I don't have that reading. I don't have
It was
but
on
there-
the email. It was attached to the email I sent you. You
Okay,
can download it.
Deuteronomy and Leviticus, from what I see here.
Okay,
The
that's fine.
Passover, the Passover reading, a quote, "For thou came forth out of the land of Egypt in haste," comes from Deuteronomy, and then the part about the four species where it does not give any reason is from the book of Leviticus. But both of them
So I was
are
going to
from
go into.
the Torah.
I was going to go into Rashi and see if he had a comment on what the symbolism was, but that's okay. We won't do that.
Take a look. Do you know?
No, I need the chapter and verse, and you just gave it to me, and I didn't write it down. Do it again. Deuteronomy what?
Leviticus
chapter
23,
verse 40.
23:40, and okay.
That's the most relevant one. That's about the four species. Nan. So we're talking about the Bernie is asking about the schach that you put on top of the sukkah, and Barry was saying there's no requirement other than you need to see the sky, and he quoted.
Right.
He said, "I said, where does this requirement come?" And Barry said, "The Mishnah, which is part of the Talmud." And so the Talmud, but the Talmud does have certain requirements about the material that goes onto the top. But it's not. But Bernie correctly points out that in New Jersey they used one thing, in South Carolina they used a second, and in Arizona they used a third, and Barry added a fourth. But all of these four share one thing in common. Anybody?
Seeing the sky.
You have to see the stars at
To see
night.
the sky.
Okay,
Or the
but what
stars.
about the material itself? What does it have to be or not to be? It can be
Natural,
different kinds.
natural item.
Thank you. Who said that, Marcia
Yes.
or Pam?
Has to be
Pam?
green.
Okay.
You were in unison.
So it can
Plant-based.
be any type of branches or so forth. And I see Minya, I think, just logged on. So we'd introduced ourselves, and we have a new participant, Barry. This is Minya. Do you want to just say a couple words about yourself, Minya?
Hi, Barry. I'm originally from New Jersey. We've been here almost
Hi.
9 years. And I love going to these classes.
It really doesn't
saying
say
that,
anything.
I'm
Oh, it's
sorry?
not-
It says nothing about the material
Okay.
in 2340. So I don't know where the material comes from. I don't even know where it says you have to see the sky, but I have to go back and read.
And a lot of these rules may come from the Talmud and not the Torah. So, but here in the Torah, it does give a quote. It says you should take on the first day the fruit of the hadar tree, the branches of the palm trees, and the boughs of thick leaf trees and willows of the brook, which are the four species. So it names the four species, but that's all it does. It doesn't say what you do with the four species. It doesn't give a lot of information. And the author's main point is it doesn't give a reason why. What is the symbolism? And that's what he's going to try to find. But it's not going to come from the Torah. Okay, Babette, do you want to read a little bit more?
Well, I think
sorry.
Pam has something to say.
Yes, okay, Pam.
Just want to remind everybody, all four species are in the biblical garden. Just walk around and find them.
Right. Did we use our own etrog this year?
Yes, I think Andre did use them.
Great. Okay. The silence inspired a great deal of creative energies to fill the gap and enhance the ritual with symbolism. However, the majority of post-Messianic Jews lacked an intimate familiarity with the native flora and plant ecology of Israel. Therefore, the most common and well-accepted symbolisms make minimal use of the four species' botanical characteristics. When these qualities are taken into account, they are interpreted allegorically.
Okay. So basically, he's saying that because we are far from Israel, and probably most Jews over the course of centuries were urbanites, that we really didn't benefit enough from the intrinsic symbolism of these species, because we really had no idea what we were dealing with. And that if we understand the agricultural background of the four species, we would understand what the Torah is trying to teach us better. Okay, sorry, Babette, continue.
No, it's okay, anytime. Most of the traditional symbolisms of the four species are recounted in the Amoraic Midrashic literature. Perhaps.
Okay, just to stop. So, Barry, does that expression mean anything to you? The Amoraic Midrashic literature.
The Amorites. But
right, and who are the Amorites?
Well, again, a tribe who was trying to kill us. I don't know. I really don't remember.
So there's the Tannaites, which are the early rabbis who lived at the time of the Mishnah, which would have been roughly 200 or up to 200 CE, which would be about 1800 years ago. And then any rabbis after that would be the Amorites, who would be between 200 and 600 CE. So which would be between 1800 and 1400 years ago. So it's basically the later Talmudic rabbis. So that's Amorite. And Midrashic literature means it comes from Midrashim. So and they're collections of Midrashim, such as Midrash Rabbah, Midrash Tanchuma, that were stories of the rabbis that were collected and put together in books. And there's also Midrashim that were not collected and, just floated around somewhere. Some of them were in the Talmud itself, although the Talmud is mostly focused on legal issues and not stories per se. So basically, this is not from the Torah. It's not even from the Mishnah. It's later. And it comes from rabbinic stories. Most of these came from texts that were written in what language? Anyone?
Aramaic.
Thank you. Who said that?
Who said what?
Who said Aramaic?
I did. Lorraine.
Ah, Lorraine. Okay. Lorraine wins the brand new car. Oh,
thank you.
You also have to score a hole in one on the golf tournament.
I give up the car immediately.
You get the car.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Midrashic, is that equivalent to commentary?
Well, Midrash is more stories. So it's a type of commentary, I suppose. But it's not a direct commentary, it's more story.
Rabbi Marcia, when you say story, do you mean more like a handed down traditional folklore?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right.
Maybe is the right answer.
You do agree with that, you're saying?
I do.
Okay. All right. But I tend to be cautious, so if I'm not 100% sure, I say maybe. But Marcia, you said that?
Yes.
All
She's right.
So
it's Amorite.
Yeah. So Pam?
So if it's that sort of a story, back to Marcia again, so it changes over years and things get added and things get taken away and we take away finally, it's moving feast.
Well, yes and no, but these midrashim were presumably told verbally for
Right.
a couple of hundred years at least, but then they were written down at some point, either in the Talmud itself or in one of the midrashic collections. Now, once it's written down, then you have the story in writing.
Okay.
Now, we're only interested in the later stories because the author tells us that most of the good material about the four species comes from the later material. And we're only obviously interested in midrashim that deal with Sukkot and specifically the four species. Okay, Babette, back to you to read.
Okay.
Very bottom of page 128.
Yeah. Perhaps the best known is the view that the plants represent by their shape the key parts of the human body. Armani opened his discourse with the text, "All my bones shall say, Lord, who is like unto thee." This verse said an allusion to naught else than the Lulav. The rib of the Lulav resembles the spine of a man. The myrtle resembles the eye. The willow resembles the mouth, and the etrog resembles the heart. David said, "There are none among all the limbs greater than these, for they outweigh in the importance the whole body." It explains, "All my bones shall say." Another popular interpretation compares the four species to different categories of Jews, symbolizing the necessity for unity amid diversity. Another exposition, the fruit of the Hadar tree symbolizes Israel, just as the etrog has the taste as well as fragrance. So Israel have among them men who possess learning and good deeds. Branches of the palm trees too applies to Israel, as the palm has taste but not fragrance. So Israel have among them and possess learning but not good deeds. The boughs of thick trees likewise applies to Israel, as the myrtle has fragrance but no taste. So Israel have among them such as possess good deeds but not learning. And willows of the brook also applies to Israel, just like the willow has no taste and no fragrance. So Israel have among them peoples who possess neither learning nor good deeds. What then does the Holy One, blessed be he, do to them? To destroy them is impossible, but say the Holy One, blessed be he, let them all be tied together in one band, and they will atone one for another. If you have done so, says God, then in the instant I am exalted. Hence it is written, it is he that buildeth his upper chambers in the heaven. When is he exalted? What time they have made unto one hand, as it says, when he hath founded his band upon the earth. Accordingly, Moses exhorts Israel, you shall take you on the first day the fruit.
Okay, thank you, Babette. So both of these quotes come from the same source, which is Midrash Rabbah. You can look in the footnote number 1 and see that. So and they're specifically from Leviticus Rabbah, because the quote that we originally dealt with from the Torah comes from the book of Leviticus. So as you know, the book of Leviticus tends to be a little bit dry and to focus a lot on the temple, but it does have information about Sukkot. And Schaefer points out that the problem is it doesn't explain why. It just says what. Yes, I'm sorry, is that who wanted to talk? Bernie? No? Anyone?
Pam.
Okay.
Pam.
Pam?
These interpretations and symbolisms to me are a real stretch. I mean, to me, these four items represent four plant materials that were in Israel. And I'm not sure that we need to take a symbolism a lot further than that.
So Midrash does that. Midrash extends it very far beyond the literal meaning. Now, literal meaning in Hebrew is pshat, and so there are people who prefer sticking to pshat, things that are pretty much directly readable from the text. And then there's drash, which is midrash. So there are people that like midrash, and there's people that don't. The first story here is about the parts of the body. And the second part is the different types of Jews. And so Pam is a little skeptical that this emanates directly from the text. So do you not like it, or do you just a little bit skeptical that it is directly relevant?
I don't see it as being relevant. It's too, there's just, I don't see a connection in any way. It's just over.
Bernie.
My take on this is pretty much like Pam's. I think that these people had too much time on their hands.
Barry, do you want to defend Midrash?
I agree with it. Yes, but it's
Sai?
very good. It's
Can I get
fascinating.
somebody to defend this?
It's very interesting. It's very good.
Okay, good. Thank you, Barry.
Marvelous.
Minya? You don't want to comment, or you don't support it?
Steve has a comment.
Okay,
I
Steve?
I just want to make sure that everyone knows to either raise their hand or wait till they're called upon to speak. We're getting a lot of mumbo jumbo here. So just.
Okay, it's hard for me to keep track because I'm on my phone in my car.
understand.
So
I'll keep track.
So my apologies. So let's look a little bit at the first.
There's one more
Midrash.
thing, Rabbi.
Yes, Barry.
There's another interpretation, by the way, that the four species represent the matriarchs, the three patriarchs, and Joseph.
Correct.
So that's just something else to think about.
Are you looking at the text?
I'm looking at your text. I'm also on Sephariah, and I'm looking at various things from the Midrash and the Gemara.
Barry is referring to Sephariah, which is the considered now the standard Hebrew text webpage, Sefaria. And Sephariah has all the text on everything, and you can go to Sephariah and plug in, for example, Sukkot, and it'll come up with all sorts of things. So,
yes. And it's .org, please. It's .org. It's not
.org. Sorry. Sephariah.org. So there's other interpretations as well. Sai.
Well, I was going to ask is whether this is really about the harvest. Peoples of that of those times would invariably celebrate the harvest. That was probably the most important holiday, because this is a food holiday, and I don't think that the Israelites were too different in that respect. And I think this is what the whole thing's about. But they added a lot of fluff to it, but basically that's what it is.
So the harvest is when you would bring in all the fruits and the grains and everything from the fields, and you would eat some, so you would prepare some for storage, you would sell some. So if you had a good harvest, everybody was very happy. So the first Midrash talks about the rib of the Lulav represents the spine of a person. So the Lulav itself is the spine. The myrtle, which in Hebrew would be the hadassim, represents the eye. And if you look at the hadassim, they're like little round leaves that look like eyes. The willow, which is the aravot, represents the mouth, and the etrog represents the heart. So is there any benefit to seeing these four agricultural leafy kind of things as parts of the body? Does that help you connect it in any way to give any meaning? Babette or Riva?
I'm not excited about all this symbolism, but I think when we move on and they talk about this being a water holiday, I found that those elements much more interesting. All of us who live in the desert appreciate how important water is. And so it shifts from being a food holiday to a water holiday, and that makes much more sense to me.
Okay. Babette, I guess we'll continue reading and move on and see if some of the later explanations have a little more appeal.
Barry wants to talk.
Barry?
I'm raising my hand trying to follow the rules, and I think this is a beautiful statement. This is the relationship between the four species in the body is a connection to Hashem.
That's what I was going to say, but they didn't call me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How is it a connection with God?
That all things are created and all things are connected to Him.
So so the fact that the four species connect to parts of our bodies shows that the whole world is connected, things to each other, and therefore to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Minya has something to say.
Okay,
Well,
Minya.
I was going to say what Barry said, but since he said it, I agree with him. I think that if you talk about symbolism, this symbolism shows you that everything was created by Hashem, as was said, and therefore the plants and the human being is just all part of the greater scheme of things.
And what about the second explanation there, that there are the four species represent different types of Jews, some that have good wisdom and good deeds, and some that have only one of each? Does that also fit into the same kind of thinking?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, Lorraine?
Yeah, this reminds me of Passover when we talk about the different type of people.
Oh, yes. Okay, so there's the simple son and the
Right.
son that doesn't know how to talk, and the wise son and the evil son. Very similar. So the rabbis seem to like to divide people into four categories.
Bernie has a question.
And we're, by definition of attending Torah study, where we at least get points for knowledge. And I think it's fair to say that at least some of us are working on the good deeds as well.
Good luck to you.
Bernie has a question.
Yes, Bernie.
You know, we are looking at this thing, I think, with the wrong perspective. The discussion is through contemporary eyes. This stuff was all written 1,500 to 2,000 years ago, and the actual event was 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. And back then, things were a lot simpler than they were even 2,000 years ago or now. And so I look at this as a harvest festival, and everything in it relates to the harvest in one way or another.
Agreed. But I
agree.
guess the rabbis are trying to extend the meaning to other things as well. So you and Sai have both emphasized the harvest aspect, and we accept that. The question is, what other meanings are there? Okay, I see Barry. So Barry won, and then who else?
But I was just going to say that what Bernie said was correct. The further we get away from the act, the more it is either diluted or over analyzed. They say the people who left Egypt are the closest to Hashem, and as the generations go by, we get further and further away, and that's what happens now. We have people who won't even show up at shul for Yom Kippur, or Rosh Hashanah. So what Bernie said was right. He is right. This was written by sages who were closer to the action, as it were.
But wait, Barry. But I thought the generation that was right there at the giving of the Torah were the ones that built that big golden what was it, Was
The
it
golden
a
calf.
horse?
Yeah, it was a
Not
golden.
not a horse.
It was a
calf.
golden
Oh my!
sow.
But they were very
No,
close
but
to the
wait,
event.
no, but those people didn't leave Sinai. They were destroyed by Hashem,
All
the
right.
builders of the golden calf. So now you have a whole clean, fresh slate of people coming
All
out who
right,
actually
Bernie.
were afraid.
Bernie, you want to
Forget
respond? No.
I'm good.
Okay, Miriam.
I agree with Bernie. I just can't
Yeah.
understand any of the symbolism.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to new category, historical symbolism. Babette.
Okay, well, according to other interpretations, the species personified the 4 matriarchs, the 3 patriarchs, and Joseph, and even different aspects of God.
All right,
Historical
that's with the previous,
symbolism.
that's
Yeah.
with the previous section. Now we get to historical symbolism.
Okay, rituals, particularly festival rituals, often commemorate a significant aspect of Jewish history. Again, the unleavened bread of Pesach, the Sukkot booth are fine examples. The 4 species also have historical significance according to Maimonides. Passover teaches us to remember the miracles which God wrought in Egypt and to perpetuate their memory. The Feast of Tabernacles reminds us of the miracles wrought in the wilderness. Maimonides continues to elaborate on the 4 species, but not without first remarking on the value of midrashic interpretations. With regard the 4 species, our sages gave a reason for their use by way of agedic interpretation, the method for which is well known to those who are acquainted with the style of the sages. They use the text of the Bible only as a kind of poetical language for their own ideas and do not intend, therefore, to give an interpretation of the text. Other examples of agedic interpretation, Maimonides continues. I believe that the 4 species are symbolical expressions of our rejoicing that the Israelites changed the wilderness. No place of seed, nor of fig, nor of vines, or of pomegranates, or of water to drink. For a country full of fruit trees and rivers, in order to remember this, we take the fruit, which is the most pleasant of the fruit of the land, branches which smell best, most beautiful leaves, and also the best kind of herbs, that is the willows of the brook. Sukkot states, Maimonides commemorates the wanderings in the wilderness and the subsequent entry into the land of Israel. The booth symbolizes the former, the 4 species the latter. Disappointingly, though Maimonides does not attribute much significance to these particular 4, they are the most fruitful, the pleasant fruit, beautiful leaves, etc. But their selection was to some degree merely practical and utilitarian, he continues. The 4 kinds also have 3 purposes. First, they were plentiful in those days in Palestine so that everyone can easily get them. Secondly, they have good appearance. They are green. Some of them, namely the citron and the myrtle, are also excellent as regards their smell. The branches of the palm tree and the willow having neither good nor bad smell. Thirdly, they keep fresh and green for 7 days, which is not the case with peaches, pomegranates, asparagus, nuts, and the like. Maimonides then believes that the four species were chosen to symbolize the entry into Israel because they were native flora of Israel that excelled in their respective qualities, were easily available, looked or smelled good, or both could remain fresh throughout the festival. Given that reasoning, an asparagus shoot may have replaced the palm and a sweet smelling peach, the citron, all things being equal.
All right, this is important for Pam to make sure that we've got all these things in our biblical garden, right, Pam? Okay, and so if you have asparagus in there, no asparagus. All right, we need to plant some asparagus in our biblical garden. Okay,
Rabbits eat them.
Well, we'll have to worry, keep the rabbits out. Okay, keep going, Babette.
Noga Haraveni, the founder of Israel's botanical garden, Neot Kedumim, offers a fascinating commentary on Maimonides' interpretation. He considers the four species.
All right.
Considers the four species as symbols borrowed from the world of nature that reenact the desert wanderings and entry into the promised land. The date palm represents life in the desert, its natural habitat. The willow of the brook portrayed the plants that grew among the Jordan River, the entry point into Israel. Upon entering, the Israelites encountered the forest thicket covering the hill country, symbolized by the myrtle branches, whose natural habitat is hills. After clearing the thickets, the hill country was cultivated and planted with the choicest fruit trees, represented by the citron. The ritual of these four species, according to Havareni, is to teach. You have led us through the wilderness in the days of Exodus from Egypt and sheltered us in booths, the shade of the date palms. You set us under the willows of the Jordan. Finally, you led us across the Jordan River, dry shod with brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey, to clear the leafy trees in its thick forest land in order to turn the land into the fruit-bearing groves.
Okay, thank you. So this whole section is supposedly dealing with historical symbolism. Does anyone want to give a stab at explaining what it's talking about? Bernie or Cy?
Marcia has a comment. Marcia has a
Steve?
comment.
Marcia has a hand up.
Marcia.
Unmute, Marcia. Marcia, unmute.
Sorry, I had myself unmuted for so long. I think it's just explaining when the Israelites came into the land and they reclaimed the land from wilderness and made it into productive food-bearing orchards, etc. And that's what it's saying. It's not that deep, I don't think, the statement.
Okay. Nan or Pam?
Barry's had his hand up.
Okay, Barry? You have to
You're
unmute.
muted.
Barry, you have to unmute.
Okay. What I think it's just very nice reading. I don't think it has any context of religious connection whatsoever. It's just a man's interpretation of what he thinks the four species are.
So Maimonides is emphasizing the fact that the four species, in contrast to the actual sukkah, the sukkah represents the wanderings in the desert. The four species represent the time once the Israelites actually stopped wandering. So although we may bench the lulav and etrog in the sukkah, in some ways the sukkah represents something very different than the four species. Okay, Steve, Riva, or Sai, or Bernie.
I'm good.
Yeah, I have a question. When historically did the sukkah come into being?
We don't know.
Because I look at this as, again, I'm trying to look
Oh, we
at
do
the
know.
eyes of the people at that time. And I could see, since it's a harvest festival, and this is what I think I remember learning in Sunday school, that the sukkah represents the huts that the farmers built out in the fields when they went to harvest, so they didn't have to schlep back home every day.
Aha. So then that explanation would be counter to the explanation that the huts were built in the to live in during the 40 years of wandering. Barry.
Yeah, that's what that is. But it's interesting because I'm looking again back over Sephariah. And it's a lot about the species, but nothing about the actual hut, nothing about the actual sukkah itself. So that's a great question. When did we start using the sukkah to celebrate this holiday?
And what Maimonides is emphasizing is that the sukkah itself and the four species have to be looked at separately, that although in our minds they're intricately connected, they may not be. They may be from different periods of history. They may indicate very different things. Sai.
Well, I think traditionally Jews have never been known as people of the land. Jews are not farmers. So if you will, the sukkah, I think, might have been some kind of an instrument to make them more aware of the earth, the place that they get their food, so forth and so on.
Does anybody want to respond to Sai's comment, which is very provocative?
I don't know any Jewish farmers.
Okay, Lorraine?
I found what Sai said about
I
people
know a
of
lot
the
of
land.
dressed people, but not farmers.
I think of us as people of the book.
That's what we are. That's what we're called. Jews
That's
are the
right.
people of the book.
That's
But
what
if-
I think of us as.
But if we go back far enough, weren't Jews farmers? I mean, isn't that what this holiday is about, celebrating the farming life? Minya or Miriam or Ray?
Well, this is Ray. I think it's rather beautiful that these four species were important to them as they settled in this new land that was fertile and gave them food and beautiful things around them. And here we are in the 20th century. Israel is a place of malaria and no land of milk and honey. When the Israelites started, when the Hebrews from our different countries started going into Palestine, they used these four species to renew the land. One of them soaks up the sodden malaria countryside. In the desert, the groves of palm give them water and change the character of the desert when you get enough date palms in there. I think it's quite remarkable. I am very impressed by this particular reading of the Sukkah and of Sukkot.
Now these four species, I never really understood why you couldn't eat any of them, right? I mean,
That's
if
not
they're
true.
going to be agricultural things, I was hoping that they would be among more above everything else figs. Israeli figs are the most delicious figs in the world, and I couldn't understand why you wouldn't have figs as part of one of the four species. Ray.
Well, that's it. Some kinds of the palm give us figs. That's a food. So it's a rather encompassing set of materials that are all natural to this country at the time they entered it, and are still natural to that country as they renew it.
All right,
And
Lorraine?
Rabbi, okay.
Yeah, Barry?
No, actually, you can eat one of them. You can eat a citron. You can eat an etron.
Okay.
They make jam
Yeah,
out
but
of it all the time.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah, but it's not the thing I would first put as a high priority about something I'd like to eat. I mean, the citron,
No, it's good.
it's like a lemon, and but I'd rather have figs and grapes.
Oh, the figs are great there.
Miriam.
Well, as we go along, I agree with what we're going to read further on about the agricultural symbolism, where they say Sukkot is the harvest of summer crops, fruits and vegetables.
Aha. Okay, and these are crops that are in the ground during the summer. And it also talks about the Israeli climate, that it's got two seasons, a wet winter and a dry summer.
Dry summer, yes.
And that would have a lot of impact. So in other words, to really understand these symbols, you have to understand the Israeli agricultural and climatic environment. Bernie or Cy? Bernie.
Yeah, do we know that the climate in that area was as it is today, or was it different?
Not sure, Barry?
I would think it was not significantly different, but I don't know.
Minya?
Well, it's a climate similar to ours, actually.
Well, Israel has a much wetter winter.
Well, they have, but similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar. They have a wet and a dry. What do we have? We don't really have,
Dry and dry.
We have a hot and hotter.
All right. They're hot too in the summer.
Steve, comment?
No comment yet.
Okay. All right, let's get a new reader for agricultural symbolism. We've mentioned a few of the ideas in here already. Miriam, you wanted to read?
Sure. Agricultural symbolism. All the major holidays have agricultural as well as religious and historical significance. Pesach celebrates the barley harvest. Shavuot, the wheat harvest, and Sukkot, the harvest of summer crops, fruits, and vegetables. The holiday rituals strongly reflect these agricultural realities. During Pesach, the Omer offering from the newly harvested barley was presented in the temple, and on Shavuot, 2 loaves of bread baked from the freshly harvested wheat were offered. The 4 species of Sukkot have been similarly viewed as 4 representative species of plant material marking the summer harvest. If this were true, however, the 4 species would be made up of cultivated edible plants that were harvested at the festival of the harvest. The ritual would have been far more meaningful if the commandment was to bring a cluster of dates, a bunch of grapes, 2 fig leaves, and 3 olive branches.
You see, that's what I was saying all these years.
Okay. Instead, neither the willow nor the myrtle were used for food, although the myrtle may have served medicinal purposes. The citron was certainly not a major cultivated fruit, and the part
Okay,
of
contrary, although Barry pointed out that you could make etrog jam can be quite good.
And the citron was certainly not a major cultivated fruit, and the part of the date palm required for the ritual was neither harvested nor edible. In fact, harvested cultivated fruits are strikingly absent from the Sukkot rituals. Other than the picturesque custom of hanging fruits in the sukkah and the possibility that the sukkah symbolized the booths built at the time of ingathering, the harvest actually plays a surprisingly small role in a celebration of a festival meant to commemorate the ingathering of the fruits. There is an additional significance to the time of Sukkot besides the summer harvest. Sukkot marks the major climatic changes of the year, which delimits the end of one agricultural cycle and the anticipated beginning of the next. The Israeli climate is characterized by only 2 seasons, a wet, cool winter and a dry, practically rainless warm summer. From approximately May until September, very little rain falls in most portions of the country. The first rain, Yoreh, generally arrives sometime in September or October and continues through April, when the late rains, Malkosh, end the wet winter season. In Jerusalem, for example, 20 inches of rain may fall between October and May, but there may only be 1/2 of an inch throughout the rest of the year. Similar proportions are the rule throughout most of the country. Biblical agriculture was determined by this disproportionate climate pattern. A 10th century BCE agricultural calendar found at Gezer reflects the climate and describes the cycle of sowing and reaping as follows. Here's 2 months of olive harvest. Here's 2 months of planting grain. His 2 months are late planting. His month of hoeing up of flax. His month is harvest of barley. His month is harvest and feasting. His 2 months are vine tending. His month is summer fruit. The calendar begins with the 7th month according to the Hebrew year. Throughout this month and the next, the final harvest of olives and their processing took place. During this period, the Yoreh rains were eagerly awaited to moisten the parched soil after the long, dry summer months. Until these first rains fell, the fields could not be plowed and the new cycle of plantings had to be postponed. Too long a delay of the Yoreh meant agricultural disaster and imminent famine, and precipitated national fasting and repentance.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. We're gonna stop there. We may not be able to cover the entire section. Comments on this section. So this is called the agricultural symbolism. What kind of agricultural symbolism does Schaeffer suggest you can find in the Sukkot holiday?
Olives.
Steve.
Olives.
Olives.
The harvest of olives.
Okay.
Well, the barley harvest, the Shavuot, wheat harvest.
Okay. Ray.
And the harvest of the fruits and vegetables.
Okay, Ray?
I'm struck by a 10th century BCE agricultural calendar. And
Uh-huh.
it's very specific. And I suspect it is also viable now. This is a different country than the one we live in.
Mhm.
It has a desert. It has places where the water runs and the willows hold up the water for the land, and good place to plant. To me, it reads what Israel's country is like, the physical country.
And this calendar was excavated and reported by the very famous Johns Hopkins archaeologist Albright, who published this in 1943. And so very interesting, yes. And this is an extra biblical source, right? It's something they found digging around in Israel. Pam? Lorraine or Minya? Marcia or Nan? Marcia, and then Barry.
Did they not have certain, maybe I'm just, well, no, never mind. I'm thinking back to the Nile, which was flooding twice a year or something of that sort. But they were very dependent on the rain, obviously.
So what is the symbolism of this now? All right, Barry?
No idea.
How does this connect to symbolism? Anybody? Bernie? Miriam? Riva?
Yeah, this article was written by a horticulturalist. So, that's where his head is. And he emphasizes the agricultural symbolism and the, what's the word he uses? Ecological symbolism. And I thought what I found most helpful was at the beginning of the agricultural symbolism section, it says, all major holidays have agricultural as well as religious and historical significance. So I thought it's useful when we think of these sections, we're looking at the agricultural, the religious, and historical symbolism. And so we keep moving in between these three dimensions.
So one is religious, right? So we're a religion. So anything in Judaism, we want to find a religious significance. And then we also have the historical symbolism. Now, historical doesn't necessarily mean it's something that actually happened, but it's a reference to something that we see as an event. But there too, it can be symbolic or it can be real. It doesn't really matter. And then the third part, which us, as urbanites, we may underestimate or ignore completely, is the agricultural. Now let's move ahead to the rain festival part at the very bottom of 133, so we can get a little bit of the water part in. Riva had previously mentioned that she found the water part to be the most interesting part of this article. Do we have a new reader? Don't all volunteer at once. Minya?
Marcia raised.
Unmute, please, Minya.
I did not print this part, so I don't have the next page. Sorry.
I have it.
Nan says she'll read.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Rain Festival. Sukkot then, in addition to celebrating the harvest, marks the climatic transition between summer and winter, drought and rain. It was a time for the biblical Israelites to acknowledge and praise God for the previous year's rain and subsequent abundant harvest of the agricultural year that was now coming to a close. At the same time, it was a period that evoked the deepest hopes, concerns, and fears regarding the expected and awaited rains so necessary for a successful forthcoming agricultural cycle. In fact, almost all the rituals of Sukkot, including those observed only in the temple, revolve around rain and water. The harvest is conspicuously ignored. In many respects, water is the dominant theme of the festival of the harvest. The Mishnah states that on Sukkot, judgment is passed in respect to rain. In light of this, it is only fitting that the festival literally overflows with water rituals. Throughout the year, certain sacrifices in the temple were accompanied by wine libations. During Sukkot, however, water libations, Nisukah Hamayim, were added to the daily morning offering, and both wine and water were ritually poured along the sides of the altar. The Mishnah describes the occasion as follows. How was the water libation performed? A golden flagon holding three logs was filled from the Salom. When they arrived at the water gate, they sounded a tikki'ah, long blast, and a teruah, tremendous note, and again a tikki'ah, long blast. The priest then went up to the ascent of the altar and turned to his left where there were two silver bowls. Our Judah said they were of plaster, but they looked silver because their surfaces were darkened from the wine. They had each a hole like a slender snout, one hole being wide and the other narrow, so that both emptied themselves together. The one on the west was for water and the one on the east for wine. The significance of the rite is pointed out by Rabbi Akiva. Why did the Torah enjoin on us to pour out water on tabernacles? The Holy One, blessed be He, said, pour out wine before me on tabernacles so that your rains this year may be blessed. Related to the water libations was the Simchat Beit HaSha'uva, the celebration of the water drawing, considered the most joyous event of the year. Whoever has not seen the rejoicing at the place of the water drawing has never seen rejoicing in his life. It is an indicative Mishnaic statement. The purpose of the festivity, which took place each entire evening preceding the water libation, was to joyously celebrate the water drawing and libation of the following morning in fulfillment of, and ye shall draw water with joy. The celebration began in the evening and continued until the morning, when the water was drawn from the Siloam pool with much pomp and excitement and returned to the temple, where it was poured at the morning sacrifice.
Okay, stop for a minute, Nan. Okay, so we have here now a whole nother aspect of the symbolism of Sukkot, and it seems that in addition to the harvest, what else is being marked here?
Water.
Water. And why water?
That's what needs for life. Water is a necessity for life.
Without water, you don't have a harvest.
And what is the Israeli climatic
And it's
situation that made it good to celebrate water?
It's a desert.
Yeah.
Well, and what was the seasonal change that changed the amount of water being produced?
Oncoming water now.
Raining.
Right. So you're moving from a time of year where there is no rain to a time of year where there's a lot of rain. So you want to celebrate the coming of water. So it's not really agricultural then. So it's nothing to do with the harvest directly, although indirectly, of course, more rain will influence what kind of crops you can grow and so forth. But it's like a whole nother topic of rain and water. Now, in modern Judaism, we don't really, do we do anything with water in terms of celebrating it?
They throw our sins in the water at Yom Kippur.
Oh, okay. So we do throw sins in the water for Rosh Hashanah, but that's
Right.
more about the throwing rather than the water. What else do we do that's a water, that involves water in terms of ceremonial, that is not done as much in Reform Judaism? But yes, Minya?
The mikveh.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, do you want to comment on that, Minya?
First of all, I found my reading, so I was able to follow. The mikveh is something that, other than Reform Judaism, even though there are some women who still go, is part of a ritual that is part of your everyday life, if you're Orthodox. I don't know how else you want me to elaborate. Everybody knows what the mikveh is, I think.
Okay. Now,
But
is there a
definitely-
connection between the mikveh and celebrating rain?
Well, you'd have to have the water, no matter how you got the water to the mikveh, it would still be use of the rainwater.
It's also, like, may I?
Go ahead,
Marsha, yes.
It's a renewal, it's a cleansing. It has a lot of symbolic properties, water does.
Mm.
And I think that comes into it. And I'm sure that the rabbis elaborated on those things concerning water.
Lorraine?
Bernie has a can.
I don't have a comment.
Bernie?
Do I remember correctly that the mikveh is supposed to be filled with rainwater?
No, the mikveh has to be a running water. It has to have an inlet and an outlet. So it can't, it's not like a hot tub.
But it could involve rainwater, right?
It
So
could.
In Jamaica, for conversions, we use the Rockford mineral bath, which came from water it was rainwater that hit the mountain and came down the mountain and then flowed through the mineral bath and then down into the ocean. So it was running water that came from up the mountains down into the ocean, but the source of the water was rain.
Is there a mikveh for men?
Yes.
Well, the
I
same
thought so.
mikveh that's used for women can be used for men, sure.
I saw it in Israel, on Friday nights, the men had wet beards and stuff,
I've been to the men's mikveh in Denver. And believe me, they're not as pretty as the women's.
So I had a Riva.
Yeah, I was given a gift of some pans for making bread, and the pans were taken to a mikveh, and the pans were put through some kind of purification process also. Just wanted to quickly say one other thing about water, and that is everybody's aware that it's essential for all life. And second, there's very often an element of uncertainty related to water. You need just enough water for agricultural purposes, not too much or too little. And so I think it's a very logical thing to be included in religious practices because it's so essential, and because humans recognize that there's a quality of uncertainty about it.
Steve.
We got a couple of announcements to discuss first before we conclude. Riva's got a couple of things she wants to comment. I know we're cutting the discussion short, but this is important for the continuation of Torah study. And so Riva, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Sure. I said some of this earlier, but maybe not everybody was here at that point. And that is for Torah study, please call the temple and register that you're registered for the Torah discussion group, because we want to have an accurate count and accurate contact information for everybody in this group so that you continue to get the readings on a weekly basis.
And this group is completely free, correct?
Completely free. Second of all, Rabbi, you have a class discussing Noah.
Correct. Noah.
That's the second thing, yeah.
And his ark. And we're just starting that on October 5th, which is a Tuesday morning. It'll run from 10 to 11 a.m. That's only for 4 weeks. Members are $18, non-members $25.
And this is an opportunity to, well, both the Torah and the Noah's Flood Program, to attract some new people to the temple. And so that if you know somebody who might find this interesting, who might not be a member yet, these two programs might be attractive ways of introducing the temple to new people. So if there are people you are in touch with or you know well, who you would like to expose to the temple or temple exposed to them, please mention both Torah study and the Noah's flood. Oh, one other thing, I have copies of the calendar for the coming year, the Torah study, the Torah Parsha and Perek that we'll be doing each week. If anybody wants copies of those, please let me know and I'll send it to you.
Oh, your eyes.
Any other comments or concerns? Let us conclude then with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam,
Asher natan lana Torah v'chayei olam natan b'torah.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Look forward to seeing everyone again next week, if not more. And we'll bid you a good day.
We don't have to re-register if we've already registered, do we? Rita?
No, please re-register.
Oh, yeah?
We
Okay.
have some incorrect phone numbers, some incorrect names,
Okay.
some incorrect email
Now-
addresses. I'd like to update the whole thing so that we start
Okay.
this year fresh with all correct information.
Thank you.
Bernie, did you have a comment?
I'm just saying goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank
Goodbye.
you, everyone. Barry, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, it was a pleasure. No, thank you for having me.
Enjoyed your comments and your
Oh, you'll come to hate me.
You'll fit right in.
you'll fit right in, just exactly right.
All right. Goodbye,
Take
everyone.
care,
It's nice to
everyone.
see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Stay
First
well.
Hashem. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Rabbi, drive safely.